Hey there everyone. So this week we're going through 3 more core functionalities. I'll probably end up going through a few more because I really do want to delve further with it with this class. You seem to be keeping up quite well with After Effects. But the core functionalities for the submission of the brief are pre-composing, getting pieces of footage together, almost layered together as a composition individually and then used in another composition. So it's essentially creating a group in Illustrator or Photoshop, but here we can then go into that group and edit that as an individual video. Also working with time and understanding how After Effects uses time and sees time and what our options are when displacing or manipulating that. Also then tweening individual keyframes. So right now we go from one keyframe to another, and After Effects animates that 1 to 2 straight animation. It's this, and then it smooths to that. But what we want to be able to do is make it so it's a sort of curve into or out of or over each keyframe, so we get smoother animations that are really in our control. So to get us started, we are submitting a 1920 by 1080 composition landscape. For this submission, it will be the actual After Effects file so that we can see the manipulations that you've done, but we'll get to that towards the end. This is only a 10-second piece. It's only a 10-second composition and 30 frames per second. We're all used to that by now. I'm going with a white background color, but that's up to you. So we have our composition. We all know to go to type. This is just an example here. My type is white. So what I'm actually creating is up to yourselves. I'm just showing you the functionalities. So I have an element here. I have a text element here. And we're all used to the timeline now. We're used to the hierarchy of how the layers all work. What I want to do is I want to create an animation of this, say, spinning round, and I want it to do it smoothly. So we can go into the drop down and we can go to rotation, or we can just click R, shorthand, and create a keyframe. That's where it is now. And right now it's there at 0, and let's say at 1 second I would like for it to have spun round twice, so 2 times full spin. So now it's going to spin 2 full times. Okay, that's all well and good. Let's see it play out. Twice. What I may do is move the anchor points a wee touch so that we're really centered. Not that we have to do this. This work isn't going anywhere. Really centered. Okay. So now we have that. To get to animating the curves, I touched on this last week with easing, where we can right click on a keyframe and then go keyframe assistant, and here. I touched on that last week. But here we're going to actually look at the curvature of these keyframes. So we're in rotation, and we click the graph editor here, and that shows us this keyframe and how it gets there. It's a straight line. It goes straight to that value, straight up. We can see that value somewhat in the graph. It's straight up. Poof. And what we want it to do is smoothly transition to it. So if I select, say, this keyframe here, here's some smoothing options. There's further here. What I'd like to do is really be able to manipulate the smoothness of it. So these give us that smoothness in different capacities. Also, this one allows us to straight away have this curved arm and do it manually. So again, it's this one to get a straight curved arm. So now if we look at the animation, it goes quick and then smooth. This again is still just time. It's left to right. We can see how many seconds it goes. So it takes from about here to here for it to go straight all the way up very far, and then it smooths out. If we let's say turn it inward on itself, it goes slow. Oh, it goes slow and then quick. So that's the basic of working with these. Very nice. Let's bring it back up here. That'll take some playing and testing, but feel free to go with it. These are small presets. If we want it to go up and round, let's say we then want it to go back. Create a keyframe for that, and then we bring that up like that. So if we want to see what this now looks like, nice and smooth. So play around with the curvatures, play around with the options with this. That's the first functionality. It's not just rotation. Obviously it works with all parameters and all of the effects and all of the effects and presets that you can create keyframes and animate with. So that's the first functionality that we'd like to see improved, is working with these graph editors. It allows for a lot more versatility and really gets you actually animating, and not just moving things left, right, up and down and rotating. It gets you really genuinely animating these things. So a second core functionality would be time, and working with time and just starting to think and consider how After Effects plays with time. So to get rid of this, we click the graph editor and we're back to seeing our layer. So what I'm going to example this with is time remapping. So what we can do is go to our layer and right click, and we can go up to time. We have a few options. Time stretch is what I'm applying, sorry. We have a few options we can work with. If I bring this sort of onto a place for this to be recognized, I can stretch the current amount of time that it's set to. It's set to 100% of its play. So if this was a piece of footage and you pressed play, it would play at its normal speed, 100%. If you shorten it, for example, so this is what it looks like at 100, what we've created. If we shortened it to, let's say, 50, it halves the duration of it because that's 50%. So now it's halved in the length of the actual layer as well. So now it's much faster. If we increase it to, let's say, 200, it's a bit longer because it's twice its original speed, and we can reset this. So a good example of this would be if I create a second and then make this second about 100%, 120% of the original speed, then create another. This is just copy and pasting. Let's say 140, that'll go a bit slower. Then create another. Remember, this is just an example of what we can do with it. This isn't where you need to take the composition creatively. Then create another, and up that one to, we can also see here the duration is increasing. So if I was to play all of them now, we can see them layering. So if I make this one, say 80% opacity, you all know how to work with opacity now. Let's make them all just get lighter and lighter and lighter. There's that. So that's how we can start to work with time. If I look into here, we can also time reverse the layer. That is, as you can imagine, it simply reverses the layer, so it plays backwards. See, all the keyframes have popped here. Now it plays backwards, but I don't want that. So that is the second functionality, is to see some time stretching. When it comes to real footage, what it will do is begin, because it's a set amount of frames, it'll start to stretch that. It'll start to stretch out the amount of frames it has. So if I take this example video here and I let it load for a second, see it loading here, remember that. Once it finishes, it'll play fine. So that's how it looks at 100% of this piece of footage. If I stretch it, that means the amount of frames have been stretched. So if I go time stretch, say 150, let it load. So it's not quite as smooth, and that's because the amount of frames per second at 100 is 30. There's still only 30 frames per second in this footage, but now that second has to be much longer, so it now goes sort of choppy. If I increase it quite a bit, much choppier, nowhere near as smooth. So if I come back, time stretch. When it comes to footage also, we can work with time remapping. Enabling time remapping allows us to set keyframes for when time changes. So if I come to about here, we have our time remap tell us at what point we are now. But what I can do is I can say that I would like at this point in the composition, this bit of footage to actually be where it would be at 2 seconds. Now it's created that keyframe, so it's going to speed up from there to there and then continue normally. Quick, normal. So if I increase it by quite some, very quick, back to normal. That is another way for you to play with time. Also, you can simply freeze the composition on freeze the footage on a specific frame. So if I take it to about 3 seconds here, and I want this to be essentially an image or a freeze frame, this freeze frame, it creates this block, and now that is the frame that this piece of footage is locked at, which I don't want that. Might put that at the bottom, that looks quite nice. So the next functionality is pre-composing. What this does, as I said, is take some footage that you already have, take some elements that you already have, and puts them in a group. And then you can go into that group as a composition and play around with it there. So I have these 5 bits of text that are in the middle here. Let's hide that. They're in the middle here. It looks kind of messy here. They're just duplicates. There's not much need for it because I'm not going to edit them much anymore. And if I do, I can just go into it. So what I'm going to do is group them all together. Click, hold shift, click. You have them all. And then right click. And down here, we have pre-compose. We have some options here. These are different depending on what kind of pre-composition you're doing and what footage you're using. But generally you have these 2 options of leaving all the attributes in this composition, comp 1, and that's grayed out because that's not an option for us. Here they have to be moved to move all the attributes into the new composition. So everything that I've done to them, all the changes and new keyframes that I've added, I would like them to be editable, but in the new composition. So I have to click into the group to see them. It keeps things quite clean and concise. So if I click OK, we now have a new composition, a new piece of footage. and you can tell that by this image here. Also, we have it here. All of our compositions pop into here. So now, if I go into this composition, we have this. If you just double click into your composition, we have this, a new composition area that is simply made of all of the text that we created it from. So they're still in here and still have those properties. One thing I would like is I think I would like the whole text animation to be a bit slower. So now we have a composition, we can edit this, which will treat this lot of text as its own piece of footage. So I can go right click, time and time stretch, as we've learned, 150, and it will slow everything down. Maybe I want it a bit quicker. Remember 100% was less, so go to about there. And then I can bring in a brain scan. What I can do is go into our pre-composition, because now we can't really see the brain scan looking stuff. Select them all and change the font color. We can't see it here, but it's applied here. So let's have a look. So those are the functions for us there. I would like to see all of them used and applied in some way, and then to actually deliver this, if we simply go to File and Save As for your first save, and save it as an Adobe After Effects project. If you are using any footage, for example, I've used this brain scan footage here, this one. Create a folder and then save your project in there. So if I save it as test After Effects project save, if I go to that, it's here. But what that means is, for the submission, it'll be the folder that you create to submit. So that means when I open, or anyone opens for testing the submission, if anyone opens this After Effects project, this will be in there, and After Effects will be able to find it. If I move this out, as an example, and put it somewhere else, and go back to After Effects, that footage is now moved and is missing. That'll happen if you move footage or send just an After Effects file without all of the footage that you've used as well. Now I have to go back to here and simply reload it, because I've put it back in the same place. So for the submission, create a folder, save your After Effects project in that folder, and any footage, images, sounds that you use, put them in here as well. What may be neat is if you simply create an assets folder, and this is also a good way to keep it's good practice basically to keep your digital projects neat, clear and concise. Let's clean that up. These are now missing, so if I go back to here, you can also replace that footage, and I can find it again, and it's right here. There we are. And now I'll be able to send this folder, this example folder, to anyone, and they'll be able to open the After Effects project there. So the core functions: manipulating time, manipulating the curvature of keyframes, and pre-composing footage into its own composition for use in other compositions. What we can do is if I pre-compose these, that's not a good example. If I want that pre-composition somewhere else, I can simply create a new composition, and these are up here. You can rename these. So this, I believe, is the text rotation composition. So that's right there. We can't see it now because there's no background to it. Now we can see it. So to get these in and to move these around different compositions, you simply drag and drop them in. So those are the core functions. There will be more displayed and and shown during the class, but those are the core functions for submission. And do remember, this is the beginning of using clean and good practice techniques to transfer files to colleagues and peers when you are creating these collaborative projects. So remember the format, create a folder, save your After Effects project in there. Also, as we saw with Media Encoder, if you ever submit one for render in there, it will create it here as well. So that is the submission thus far. And if anyone has any questions, as always, just let me know, and happy creating.